The internet is cracked, the show that asks the question, can we coexist with our creation?
Hello, I'm Seth Camillo.
And I am Caroline Risberg, and we are The Internet is Cracked by Addicts for Addicts.
And today we are very lucky to be joined by Professor McKnight. He's an associate professor in the School of Information Studies at Syracuse University. He has his PhD from MIT and also worked at MIT from 1998 to 2019. His biography, he has started many things, is part of many things, and has done an enormous amount of research. And he is just a very, very accomplished computer scientist, and we are very lucky to have him on the show today. So thank you very much, Professor McKnight, for joining us.
Thanks so much for the opportunity to meet with you and your audience.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
No, they're going to love hearing from you. So I guess we're going to start with current affairs, which is we sent an email, and I guess are going to start the conversation sort of talking about DOGE, which is talking about what Elon Musk is doing. And you sort of made the point that it's not unprecedented and that you yourself had been involved in something similar. So maybe you could tell us what's similar, what's different, and maybe fill us in a little bit about what you think is happening with DOGE and Elon Musk and what he's doing relative to what has been done in the past.
Sure. Well, first, DOGE is a renamed brand initiated in the Obama administration. So a 10-year-old brand for the U.S. Digital Service or Digital Federal Service that was initiated with the idea of bringing in sort of young, technically savvy talent into different federal agencies. I have some familiarity with that from frustrated graduates of mine finding it very difficult to make it through or, getting selected for it. And then the agencies not being very warm and welcoming to young, technically savvy digital talent. So there's certain parallel to how DOGE is currently operating. And now if we rewind the clock another several decades back to the 1990s, which is actually when I was initially working at MIT after completing my doctorate there. At that point, we could start the clock with there's 2 points. Let's start the clock with the inauguration of the Clinton-Gore administration, where the White House had no working computers because the hard drives had been seized by federal court order because of some investigation of, I forget what it was exactly. So tech-savvy people, not volunteers, coming from perhaps I would say the one usual suspect agency largely, worked over a weekend to sort of re-equip the White House and get the White House online, basically. But that was the White House. The whole executive branch administration, there was an early executive order, that basically ordered all executive agencies to essentially get on the internet and have a website. And where that was, for National Science Foundation, Department of Energy, DOD, not a heavy lift. For many of the agencies, there was nobody home that really had that understanding of how things worked. So, from my MIT perch, I and others were essentially invited to assist with which we did something called ad hoc meetings, because so the difference is from my policy understanding, I did not want to be presenting ourselves as anything official. So we would come in every 2 months, essentially through the first Clinton-Gore term. Every 2 months we would be invited in, and we were invited in by the chairs of the House Energy and Commerce and the House I'll give a shout out to Senator Markey, who was Senator George Brown of the Science Committee. So essentially it was science and commerce saying, yeah, we sort of need some help here in Washington in getting Washington online. And so it wasn't just people from MIT. We would set up meetings where federal agency executives that were working and saying, okay, we figured this out, because again, there was no commercial internet at that point. That was
Oh,
still
wow.
3 years
Oh,
before the
yeah, yeah.
commercial internet. So just like figuring out how to get things working, and learn from other federal agencies and learn from private companies and learn from academics was the idea. So that went on without, again, this is one of only the second time I've talked about this in many decades, because we purposely didn't do it. I never had the money or the clout of Elon Musk, but I also we didn't want to be like coming in as if we were doing something official. So we, in some sort of gently assisted and informed and educated like academics, but also because we were new, like we weren't the federal agency, and we weren't Congress.
Yeah.
We were guests. Could be sort of invited in to facilitate as everybody sort of got up to speed. And by the end of that term, there was a commercial internet, and they didn't really need babysitting from MIT, and friends like they did in 92. So if we jump from that, some of my students in that period were well, how did the commercial internet start actually? Well,
Yeah.
NSF, there was a law, the Gore bill,
The National Science
passed.
Foundation.
The Gore bill. So while everybody thinks it's a joke that Senator Gore started the internet or claimed to, it is a true historical fact that the bill that created the commercial internet is called the Gore bill. And it was signed in the Bush administration in 1990. Most of the funds went to high performance supercomputing, but it also set a clock saying by this period, in 1995, there will not be this subsidy for the sort of essentially publicly organized internet of that period, the NSFnet, and commercial internet will go forward. So the clock was set by Congress on a bipartisan deal. That's cool.
That is cool.
We won't
Yeah.
get into all the little parts. I played a little bit of a messenger role, but messenger boy role between folks. But in any case, the important thing here is that while the Congress, declared this and the administration accepted it, the National Science Foundation actually really didn't know how to run a commercial internet or how to transition from
Right.
NSFnet to a commercial internet. So what did they do? They
Brought somebody else in.
Well, they invited, they thought we were working on this in research at MIT on the and they said, okay, they have I had a really sharp, I'll give him a shout out to Professor Joe Bailey, University of Maryland, was invited in to NSF as a summer intern. So it was like essentially one-off DOGE type, really smart young people, digitally savvy, saying, okay, you figure it out. So I thought it was funny that they really thought like one young guy was going to figure it out.
Yeah.
But remember, this is a bunch of engineers. This is from like an engineering internet, and now it's commercial. Now it's getting complicated. And he was studying economics. He's into the business school, and I can keep going on the story. I'll leave out some of the names, but just say that they got mad at him because he wasn't delivering. He couldn't figure it all out by himself in a few months in the summer. So then they came back to me, and we organized a workshop. I on internet economics. Many NSF program officers, again, leading economists, leading engineers, the leading side, okay, the economists have to understand, the engineers have to understand, they have to be able to figure out what are the elements of this, also from our research. And so I co-edited with Joe Bailey, that young PhD student by then, a book called Internet Economics, and a workshop report that was like the first kind of treatise trying to make sense of commercial internet and help understand the sort of the economics of the costs of internet service providers, traffic, and all the other elements that went forward. So again, I don't take credit. I was just in the middle there and facilitating somewhat, but that's kind of what we happened. Now that was just like one student. I have some more getting schools online. Again, going back to now Senator Markey and the E-rate program that exists to this day that provides like a 20% subsidy to schools for their internet connections. That was part of the 1996 Telecommunications Act. And also to another former student, Russell Rothstein. He went to the Department of Education, and somebody had to figure out how to put a network into a school, right? So you had to understand, but you really had to understand schools and education, not just networking. So that was actually pretty successful. He, as a summer intern, worked wrote the report that then, became the model for helping network schools across the country.
So basically, having young people in their 20s, working on big government problems in an unelected fashion is not unheard of.
Exactly.
Is what it comes down to. Are there key differences though between what they're doing, what Elon Musk and DOGE is doing versus what you were doing?
Yeah, well, so I'll just note that, you might already get by my tone. We only went where we were invited, and we would, it was a mutual agreement. And then when, once my student was inside an agency, then he's an employee of the agency and accountable to the agency. And I had no privileged access to inside information in any of those positions.
Okay.
In that. So that's a very key difference from what's been alleged to be going on in this case, where, personnel records and other matters, that are where the young, it seems like some of the young people without supervision.
They said they had read-only access, right? But now they have read and write access to $6 trillion computing system, or a computing system that distributes $6 trillion. Is that correct?
That's what I've read. That's not the scariest part.
What is the scariest part?
Yeah.
It's the worst computer breach in U.S. federal history is people forget about these things, but it's the OPM breach from more than a decade ago.
OPM breach. What is that?
Office of Personnel Management, which has the records of everybody working for the federal government. Okay, so that people died because of that.
Oh,
because some people working for the federal government, it's really important that other governments do not know who they are and do not have their information.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so there's been sloppiness, let's say, and I'm aware of allegations of several million OPM records being accessed. Now, once it's accessed, I also teach cybersecurity policy.
Yeah.
Whatever you think you're doing as Elon Musk leading an agency, this is like cybersecurity 101. You don't know what other people are now accessing that information necessarily once
so
it's
by them,
in the open.
by DOGE sifting through all these records, they're making these records vulnerable.
Exactly. Well,
Wow.
again, not even if it's not their intent, that's just a fact.
No, I wouldn't think that that's their intent, but by going through these records, they're putting people's lives at risk, basically.
It's just again, this is it's happened before, and now it's happening again in the case of federal employees. So in terms of I'll just leave it at that point.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Very. Is there any way of securing that some kind of way?
Well, again, once those records have been opened up, it's like who knows whoever was expected, like which young employees of the of DOGE had access, and Elon Musk. it's like a retracing. If anybody else accessed those, would be a cyber forensics kind of thing. That
Yeah.
so I could only speculate. So it's but of course you could lock things up, but you don't know. You'd have to. I can only speculate. I don't know what happened once it got opened. Like so, okay, like any data breach. I'll give a different counterexample where this happens. It's not just the U.S. where thing. So there was the personnel information on 1 billion Chinese was left open by like a Shanghai police station in some unsecured system for like a year, and then sold on the dark web for some very low price. It was like $50,000 or something crazy like this. So one can only so it's not only U.S. citizens and U.S. government employees that may have been impacted by kind of sloppy data handling, but right now would be my current top concern with DOGE is the sloppiness of their handling of federal data.
Okay.
Mm,
So
that's
this is
scary.
this is unusual. It is unprecedented. The type of access they have, unfettered, correct?
That for again, digital federal service has been in existence for a decade, and before that, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that sent young, technically savvy people into Washington to assist. But the normal system would be that those people would be going inside the normal system before there was a U.S. Digital Federal Service or DOGE to sort of supposedly streamline it. So if we can get back to that part of the story,
Yeah.
as the Obama administration attempted to make, to facilitate as opposed to these one-off arrangements that were made, decades earlier with some of my students. They set up procedures for this, but to be fair, again, to maybe Elon and Trump, is like the federal agencies. My perception was they were quite resistant, like the bureaucracy, to accepting these folks.
So you're sort of saying that in a way, you have some empathy for DOGE kind of running whatever roughshod into what they're doing because the process for them to become integrated fully into the government could have taken years, basically.
Now I can give another story and
Mhm.
reminder to Mark Andreessen, the VC from Silicon Valley, who's now part of this oligarch billionaire cabal. But back
Mm.
in the day, he was a really precocious sophomore at the University of Illinois who was on a DARPA contract and coded one of the first web browsers. And so myself and others, again, we were going around showing his work off to federal agencies, saying like, this is what we're talking about. This is what's coming. This is what you want to prepare for. And it was, I'm actually I'm remembering one particular meeting, I think with the broadcaster, maybe it was Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers and IEEE. And we're saying, here's the web. But we didn't actually have like moving images at that point. We just were, here's the Dead Sea Scrolls at the Vatican. And you're looking at a picture, which, okay, you know what?
Yeah.
30 years ago, that was pretty cool. But if you're in TV, you're saying, that's it? There's nothing's no motion. Are you kidding me? Like, yeah, no, this is not, and this is your content, the Dead Sea Scrolls. So that was how nerdy we were, I guess, and the disconnect at that point. But and I know other cases of like really incredibly brilliant 15-year-olds that have been like
Yeah.
brought into federal service because they were just so brilliant. So Mark makes contributions to science and engineering, and he was willing to contribute and go to these meetings and show off his new thing. And again, he wasn't always well respected or given
Right.
the credit we thought he should have at that time for what he and his colleagues were doing. But so 19, I don't have it against the 19-year-old. I have it against I'm concerned about who's over the 19-year-old that has like watching the keys for the regular procedures to handle the data. That's always my concern.
I guess it's true that we interviewed an 18-year-old, Elgin Beloy, and he's not 18 anymore. But when we interviewed him, he was 18, and he was maybe one of the most insightful people I've ever spoken with. Yeah, and he just happened to be 18. You forgot. I mean, he looked 18, but the words coming out of his mouth were not those of an 18-year-old.
No, he was so brilliant. Like, yeah, I actually thinking a lot about him when I hear about all those young kids, so called, coming in. It's like, well, that kid was extremely brilliant, or is still, So I can see it growing up in the technology and the way we who are a little bit older didn't. I think they understand it completely different.
And he was very thoughtful as well. He was very thoughtful as well. That was what was interesting. He was not just he didn't just know about tech. He knew he had thought a lot about the ethics of tech, which was pretty amazing for an 18-year-old.
Well, again, one of the reasons I'm still professoring is because I learn something every semester. I learn every day from the young people that I'm interacting with. That's my privilege.
So you don't
Yeah.
feel necessarily that what's going on at DOGE, they're meaning what they're doing, cutting stuff, cutting funding at the White House is necessarily inherently a bad thing, but you do worry from a cybersecurity perspective. Is that
Well,
correct?
there's a two parts here. Like what I wanted to make clear is like for many before Trump was inaugurated, like what exactly DOGE would be, if it was just this kind of external non-governmental body, then its impact was clearly going to be quite limited. I don't know exactly which day somebody figured out, or if that was a plan all along, that DOGE would become the U.S. Digital Federal Service that already existed. But once it did, then I say, okay, that actually now I get it. That's why it can actually have this greater impact, because again, it's not something that Trump and Elon Musk made out of whole cloth. It's something that was created 10 years ago, so you can blame Obama for it in that sense if you want. But now that's a separate issue from the mechanism to the actions, and running roughshod on USAID, which is essentially or was the United States government's soft power way to one, help in disasters or humanitarian conditions all around the world. I'm wondering whose interests that actually serves. But it's so the actions over and what's been, let me say another thing. So what's been announced as executive orders and the actions taken thus far on announced federal funds withholding and then court cases. There's litigation going on, so a lot of these things are up in the air, and I don't want to speculate too much because I do teach information security policy in a joint between the iSchool, the School of Information Studies where I am, and the College of Law. Taking court, I'm not a lawyer, so the final outcomes of those cases and the struggle over that funding remains to be seen. But so that's a separate matter than does the mechanism of the U.S. Digital Federal Service and DOGE now.
So essentially, to sort of clarify, you're worried about cybersecurity. You may be worried about policy stuff, but that is to be determined by the courts. We will find this out over the next few weeks, few months, whether what they're doing is legal.
Yeah, I was on Fox News San Francisco where they're trying to put me on the spot and make me say those stuff was illegal, and I just said the same thing. I'm not a lawyer, but if you are one of those people being asked to resign from the federal government, you should consult your lawyer before you
Yeah.
sign anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were saying they may not even. Yeah, it sounds like a legal mess. Like even the contracts that they have them sign for the people that are resigning, there's no guarantee that those contracts will even be enforceable in the next few months. I mean, it's just it's a legal mess, is what it sounds like.
So I have a question. Say, in your view, how well does the U.S. policy address the challenges of cloud computing in national security, critical infrastructure?
Like, well, I'll do this. Okay, so these things, your smartphones, okay, being able to reach the internet from your smartphone and do online transactions with security and not having like bring your own device. I was brought in with by like the Wall Street Bank CIOs and Cisco maybe 12 or 13 years ago to help figure some of that out. So because the billionaires back then wanted to be able to like spend 10 million in Germany and charge it to their bank in France while they live in Switzerland and not like break laws in 3 countries.
Yeah.
So that was like really like what was the early. So this is early cloud, like early commercial cloud it was like who was the first key customers. It was the usual suspect billionaires. So that was being sorted. Again, that spilled over to benefits for the wider industry. And most people don't even know, like, how did this stuff get worked out? Like, why can you take
Right.
get up from your phone onto a corporate network and not, or why your bank account isn't always automatically drained because you downloaded some bad app onto your
Right.
phone. So that had to get all figured out early on in that era. Now we go back to the federal government, your question, and cloud.
Yeah.
And just because like NIST helped define like what is cloud and helped the world and the industry begin mass commercialization of cloud computing, didn't mean the federal government internally had its act together. There were early efforts to sort of reduce, like what they did understand was the cost of having all of these separate data centers for every single department and agency and bureau. So they put in place like a mandate to say, just rationalize that, having, fewer larger data centers, essentially to manage. And then at some point, I have to give a shout out to the CIA because
They
they
don't
were,
normally get shout outs.
yeah, well, they don't get too many, but
Oh.
they AWS, which was like again the early dominant leader in cloud, but they were not considered to have the top security levels of like a Microsoft systems, and they let out an early contract for manage their own cloud, and when they awarded it to Amazon. Okay, that what that means, AWS had really grown up, that they really could have top level security if the CIA was satisfied with it for their information. Then it really was possible. Like there wasn't an argument that you couldn't do cloud with sufficient security. You just had to like really care and pay attention to it. So if we jump from that as like a early proof point in validation for cloud inside the federal government, again, bipartisanly, on a bipartisan basis, CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, was initiated in the early first Trump administration on legislation from the begun under Obama, but the process. So that consolidation inside Department of Homeland Security began to sort of, and in its which set up a way for all federal agencies to sort of be able to manage their cloud insecurities, as opposed to like Department of Defense or CIA having their act together, and individual agencies getting sort of threat information, training, and sort of standards for best practices managed. That's been much better. And again, I give credits to. I'll give credit to the Trump administration for getting that going, the first Trump administration, following through again on bipartisan agreement of the need for that. CISA's grown up really well over these last 7 years. And the reason, actual where we talk about election security, they also handle federal
Yeah.
election security. So they've done a fine job there. So from whether it's from cloud inside the federal government has gotten better. And we get to the however, it's just always like one data breach, one sloppy,
Yeah.
overstressed engineer away from some bad things happening. And that's where, again, this kind of rush over the last several weeks has me worried.
Yeah.
Yes,
I can say
yes.
that.
I've heard that there are with the advent of artificial intelligence, the attack numbers have gone from billions to many, many billions of attacks because you can
Wow.
automate the attacks, meaning the cybersecurity attacks, which,
Right. Yeah. No,
become a more
it was
dangerous
already,
world.
if you look at the statistics over the last several years, the ransomware cases, the data breaches, and the focus also of advanced persistent threats, another fancy word for, Iran and China,
Yeah.
Russia,
Okay.
and North Korea. And cyber criminals. Well, not cyber criminals that are being paid by those nation states. Yeah, so the attack have gone through the ceiling. Also because, again,
Right.
there's so many different devices in our lives. That goes back to the Internet of Things
Mm-hmm.
aspect. So as more as those smart watches and Rings and Nests and Alexas, not to just name names, but those are somewhat those are the more devices that are connected to the internet, the more ways threat vulnerabilities are around us.
Yeah, I've
Oh,
heard that
wow.
even like
Yeah.
smart TVs, people
Bingo.
can
Yeah. And
get.
what about those meta glasses now? Like, I mean, I don't know if that's anything with anything, but I'm just think those are so weird. They could film or else.
Yeah, well, those are not the. Let's see. I don't think we can even say it on a podcast, right? Or I don't know what we can say on a podcast, but we remember the Google glasses from.
Yes, I remember those. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know what
Yeah.
people that were wearing them were called?
No.
No.
Glass holes.
Oh, okay. Glasses. Okay.
That's
Yeah,
funny.
I heard that people are doxing. Like you can instantly using the Meta glasses. You can instantly use facial recognition
Yeah.
technology. I've seen people pretend to show that off. They'll walk on the street and then wear the glasses and it'll identify somebody's face, and they'll just walk up to them and they have all their information, and they'll pretend like they know them. Like, hey Seth, oh, I loved your film you made. That was really great. I watched it. And I'd be like, really? Wow. Nobody watches them. Hey, you're one of the very few. Yeah.
And they know everything about
Let's
you.
go have a drink.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean,
And you pay
yeah, yeah, you pay, definitely.
because I got your credit cards out.
Yeah, exactly. I pay, but actually you're paying.
Yeah.
You just don't know it. But
And that's
maybe,
pretty scary, actually.
yeah,
That's
it is
really,
scary, yeah. But maybe
Yeah.
we should switch, since we have limited time, why don't we switch to your latest endeavor,
Yeah.
which is, I know you're working with the USDA. It's called the USDA's Climate Smart Commodities Program. But as I understand it, it's using blockchain technology to do carbon tracking in a way that hasn't been done before. So I think some people are familiar. Why don't you explain it?
Yes, please.
Okay, so the U.S. federal government, Department of Agriculture, have initiated a program called Climate Smart Commodities, and the effort is like $3 billion plus program with like $60 million grants to each state that we're trying to encourage farmers to adopt practices that would sort of reduce. First, like you could do agriculture and reduce carbon emissions, or you could do timber processing in a way without, again, as much carbon emissions. So essentially helping or trying to incent farmers and producers. Most of the money was going to farmers and producers to sort of adopt practices that would contribute less carbon to the atmosphere, which is, of course, is what's leading to the greater climatic instabilities and extreme weather events that we could go on about, but we don't need to right now. So that's kind of the overall objective of the national effort. Here in New York State, we happen to have we're home to, we're home to the Big Apple and a lot of money. And we're also home to Chobani yogurt and a lot of cows in upstate where Syracuse University is. And so we have kind of serious agriculture, serious money. And I'm privileged to be at Syracuse University, where there's like the #1 school of public policy. I'll give a shout out to Maxwell School.
Wonderful.
And my colleague, Professor Jay Golden, who's been kind of a national leader in, he has an engineering environmental background from Duke, other leading universities, and essentially bringing not academics, but academics. Well, let's just say last spring break, we were in Boston with KPMG, Fidelity, and life insurance, the insurance. So people that are not kidding around, and they're not just like trying to do good for the climate because they're like social change activists. It's because like they're trying to make money and they want to keep making money for a long time. So it's like bad for business if things like what the Southern California fires happen. In any case, so that's the overall objective. That means like let's try to move towards a net zero, like reduce carbon emission overall and re-engineer like economic processes and supply chains. So now we get to the specific.
I think it's very important what you said, though, that this is free market driven. I think that's very important for our viewers to understand. It's not just
no, it's not just a federal. Well, at least again, I can't speak for all 49 other states. I'm just saying like what my corner of it is very much is like. It's the big money in New York City and some academics and agricultural interests upstate and trying to set like new national or internet like world standards for how to do this on a global scale. And now we get to my corner of the project. One of the major problems in what's called voluntary carbon markets, where firms are essentially buying and selling credits for reducing or trading carbon emissions, is there's a huge amount of fraud, because if you get paid, billions of dollars for making up data, you'll do it, right?
Right.
So now we get to blockchain. What does blockchain do? It's, if we know Bitcoin, there's 2 trillion roughly in the Bitcoin market now. And if it was possible to steal it, people would have stolen it already, is what I say. So I also teach blockchain management. So using distributed ledgers for decentralized trust technology to establish and to verify and validate carbon transactions, that's kind of my corner of the research effort. And so it's essentially combining cloud computing, because blockchain needs the compute to run, and it has to be distributed because the forest could be in Peru or the Amazon or the Adirondacks in New York State. So at the moment, we're behind me. You guys can see the poster boards, but some of them are from a Lake Placid climate smart forest workshop we held up there in the Adirondacks, which is like, again, a really big forest in New York State. Last November 1st, where my students showed off for the first time something called provable evidence tracing. Going back to these devices where the use case is, you can take a picture, there could be a GPS location information, a timestamp on it. You have that already, essentially, but you don't have that on a blockchain. But if you did, you could take that to the bank, and you could say, if you took a picture of a timber batch, and a timber batch, I learned this from hanging around the forestry industry a little bit, is a bunch of logs on a truck, after they're harvested, that's called a timber batch.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So if we take a picture of a timber batch on that loading site in the Adirondacks, we at this time and date, we say this came from here. We can prove it. And now as that truck moves from the woods to a lumber mill, and then the logs that are cut at the lumber mill move on another truck to another point in some supply chain for like building, we can track and trace commodities from the point of origin to the point of consumption. And that data, which is very kind of granular data for voluntary carbon markets, can now provide truth, as opposed to in some of these large markets up to 90% fraudulent data, because it's free money if you can get away with bad data.
Can you explain real quick, just for viewers and me,
Sure.
yeah, exactly how a carbon market, well, not exactly, but in a general way, how the carbon market works. People trade it as almost like a commodity, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So there's, and these have been in existence for several decades, but
Mhm.
say, again, let's see if you're, talk about I'm trying to think about, Target. We can say, Target has a very large supply chain. Target, again,
Mhm.
just what I said about Target wants to stay in business
Mhm.
for, let's say, the next 50 years at least. And so they don't want to be basically guilty of, polluting their own pool
Okay.
by being responsible for sending a lot of carbon into the atmosphere. So
Okay.
parts of their supply chain some products that they sell, some things they do may contribute. But on the other hand, they say, okay, if somebody else, like say somebody that owns land, there was a bunch of trees in the Adirondacks, instead of cutting those trees down, just leave them standing. Those trees soak up carbon, and you could get essentially a credit saying, okay, or a carbon offset. That would be a carbon offset credit. So we say, okay, you did this that added carbon to the atmosphere, but you did this that reduced carbon from the atmosphere. And now that sort of evens out your overall corporate impact. So that's the basic concept. It's a way to buy and sell, where the forestry owner is saying, otherwise I'm going to cut down these trees because I need to make money too. We say, no, don't cut down the trees. We'll
Right.
actually plant more trees, and we'll pay you to do that, to maintain this kind of carbon receptacle here going.
And the
Which leads,
problem is people
Yeah.
lie, and what you're doing is
You make them
making it.
accountable.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
Right,
that's what
right.
we're setting up a pilot, and we have demonstrated that in the Adirondacks last November. I was going to say, and then 3 weeks later, within a week, colleagues in Brazil, and there's another large forest everybody knows, the Amazon, were
Yeah, I heard
contacting
about it.
me. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're not the company, the Amazon,
Yeah,
were
no,
contacting
yeah.
me saying, "Oh, you got something innovative. You have this innovation that
Yeah.
we want to hear about." So within a couple weeks, we were speaking at a workshop in the Brazilian Amazon to some of the top sustainability researchers in the Amazon and South America, but also from Norway, the UK, elsewhere, about what we were doing in the Adirondacks. And again, going back to the original objective of the project, which is to set, like, we're not just trying to do this for New York State, we're trying to help influence world standards.
Yeah.
So within 4 weeks of that first introduction of this capability, we had submitted a proposal. Again, I give a shout out to my Syracuse University Office of Research, which doesn't probably get very often shout outs on
Oh,
things,
yeah.
but they moved incredibly fast. This is the fastest in my 2 decades here they ever moved, because there was an opportunity to join. We were invited in very quickly to join this big international research consortium, where we would be taking, again, this technique blockchain tool that we're essentially prototyping or piloting here in the Adirondacks, and then also bring it to the Amazon potentially as early as fall of this year for further early testing and local feedback from communities if it could be adapted for use for similar purposes there as well.
Oh, I mean, that would be amazing. So they can actually help. This can help to not cut the Amazon down the way they have been doing, and everybody will be accountable for it. And I assume with blockchain you can really trace where everything's going. Is
Bingo.
that correct? Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's the whole idea. And what I
Yeah.
was going back to the workshop in Lake Placid November 1st, we wasn't just I had my students, the cool new tech, we had some industry folks, but the real key colleagues were in the forestry industry. You say again, they're the ones that make their living doing this, or
Hmm.
from the American Carbon Registry, which is like that's all high quality. The best data you can do without blockchain, they're really good. But still, when we showed them, like, this is what we're trying to develop, where we could have this, like, complete verification and proof mechanism, they immediately said, "Oh, yeah, we get it."
Hmm.
And why did they show up at the workshop? Like, when we were trying to explain, like, why take the time to hang out with a professor and some students? It was,
Uh-huh.
you wanna make more money, right? And it's like,
Uh-huh.
"Oh, yeah, okay. Well, you're gonna make if you have better quality data and the buyers are not suspicious of, like, the prices in the carbon markets are really low now because people don't trust the data. So, okay, get trusted data, make more money, and help
That's
save the
smart.
planet. Why was the win-win-win thing if we can make it all
Yeah.
work?"
Yeah. That's really smart.
Those are two
And
things that don't normally go together, saving the planet and making money.
No? It can happen.
That's really wonderful.
yeah, and I don't really understand like the whole. So I guess it's like how you can, if a country, I assume a country would use too much of the I can hardly ever say it, the carbon, and then they can borrow credits from another country, or
It's
how
a
is
it's
that?
Yeah, no, actually, it's the current process has, where essentially, yeah, you could be increasing carbon emissions in Peru, but you're offset and lowering in Brazil, and because it is really one atmosphere, right?
Hmm.
That's how the current markets work.
Okay.
And they're probably traders and whole industries, trading floors and floors of Deutsche Bank or whatever who are dealing with this stuff.
Well, there is, but it's like, okay, so who else has been I've been sort of working on, getting to this point for several years. So it's like I keep telling my students, like, who else has been paying attention to this, like, old professor in upstate New York? It's the world central banks. It's like the money of the world.
Hmm.
There's something called OMFIF, the Official Monetary Financial Institution Forum, which is essentially the think tank for the world's, like, I'm not kidding. This is the world central banks. And and now, do they actually, no offense to the money of the world, like, do they actually care about saving the planet? No, they care about making money. Um,
Yeah.
and so the securitization, if the data is trustworthy, now you can do derivatives and
Mhm.
securitize, tokenize, do all these kind of secondary fun things that really rich people like to do.
Uh-huh.
Which you can't buy and sell that with, like, bad data, though.
Uh-uh.
So we'll see how far we get, but we're off to a good start with our
Essentially,
effort.
the way it is now, I'm buying either one stock or 10 stocks, and I don't know. And with your system, I know I'm getting 5.
Bingo. That's exactly what
Yeah.
again, I have to be clear, nothing's mine per se. I'm just, a cog in a machine. There's these young, smart people that do all the work, and I'm just part of along for the ride.
No, I mean this would really be amazing because as we know, like the climate is changing, and global warming and all this kind of thing. And if we can try to stop this, and people and countries, and we're all be accountable, and we actually know where the money or where everything is going. I mean this is a big changer, I would think.
Yeah. At it
Yeah.
at the right time. Well, the right time would
Yeah.
have been 30
I
years ago,
mean,
but
many years ago,
Yeah,
but
but
right.
but we didn't have the
Hey, we're
technology to
doing what
do
we
it then.
can as fast as
yeah.
we
Yeah.
can.
Because
Yeah.
from what I've heard, we're at the edge of we're definitely at the precipice.
It's a scary time here, but well, and I have to I'll keep giving shout outs to
Yeah.
my now my dad, 96-year-old
Oh.
dad. Who's been
Oh.
worrying like obsessed about this and worrying about cooling the planet for 30, 40 years. That's my father, who's an old research scientist. So
Mm.
so there is definitely methods. The carbon markets are just part of a bigger puzzle where like we can all be worrying about like going over the edge. We can also reverse. We can go in reverse. We can cool the planet. We can change things so that it's like nothing's inevitable here. This is a choice that we're making
Mm-hmm.
to just keep going in this direction where it's possible, and it's possible to do it using market mechanisms and making areas more livable. Just have to listen to my dad, and I'll teach you how.
Well, I'm
Oh,
very
like that.
glad that you're getting positive feedback from your 96-year-old father. That's pat on
Yes.
the back from yeah. That's really great. That's really great. That is
Yeah, and
actually really wonderful that you're doing
no,
something
I
that he's
love that. I
interested in.
love that.
That's great. It's wonderful.
And I have a lot of respect for anyone who's 96-year-old. That's, I mean, that's, but let's say that you want to get involved in
Yeah,
this. How would
that's
you
a
get
good question.
involved? Because this is something wonderful.
Yeah. So, great question, and we certainly welcome outreach. Um, Dynamic Sustainability Laboratory. I'll say it again. Dynamic
Like,
Sustainability Laboratory.
very dynamic.
That is the um, research lab that I'm
Mm-hmm.
affiliated with of the Maxwell School that has a number of these, transition to net zero projects. They're setting they're meeting with Nike this month, for example, for
Oh,
having helping make their supply chain more sustainable. When I mentioned Target, that's not like a random mention. The Dynamic Sustainability Laboratory is working with Target to also
oh,
address
great.
its supply chain issues. So it's again, and it's working with the insurance industry, those consultancies. So and we've had like public outreach meetings moving like whether Boston, Minneapolis, anyway. There'll be meetings at different locations across the country that have been held, and if there's people with firms that would like to participate or researchers that would like to propose opportunities or just public interest. Or again, if there's people looking for like really smart young people to help
Yeah.
them figure out how they could be more sustainable, and there's young capable graduates, really incredible, coming out of this program as well. So if you can just do a Google search on Dynamic Sustainability Laboratory and contact me and my colleagues through that mechanism, or I guess I can do this. My email. Do we do this? I don't know
Yeah.
what you guys do.
Yeah, you
Okay.
can
No,
do
yeah,
it.
do it. Yes, please.
You do what you yeah. Go for it.
Yes.
Okay. Well, so again, the name's Lee McKnight, and the email's lmcknigh, no T, at syr.edu. And if I don't get buried by 500 other emails, I might respond. Contacting the Dynamic Sustainability Laboratory is probably more reliable, but I would try to interact with anybody that would like to help, again, change the path we're on for the climate.
I was trained up
Wonderful,
to be
wonderful.
was about to take actuarial science exams, and I have to say that, and also the fires in LA, I would think that the
Well,
insurance companies would absolutely love what you're doing because the insurance industry is dealing with a level of variance that may not be able to sustainable, really.
mhm.
The risk is off the charts. Yeah. So there's innovative insurance partners of the dynamic system. So I'm going back to that event during spring break in Boston in March. I'm probably forgetting. I can't shout them out because I don't remember their name exactly. But the insurance, like innovative part of the insurance industry is already, part of working with Professor Jay Golden, who leads the Dynamic Sustainability Laboratory, and maybe not the whole. There's more industry should join in. And now going back to the LA fires, I have family there. I was there visiting my daughter and grandson, and I was coughing and choking, and that's like that. Seeing the skies, it was reminding me like of a toxic planet. That was my phrase. That's scary, and it's just more coming incoming like that. Again, until we work together to make it profitable to do better for the planet.
I was just going to say if you involved, if EU are involved in any kind of way, or they reach, different countries in the world.
Yeah, well, so I mentioned, there's something called the Belmont Forum, which is a collaboration of, I guess, wealthy nations, to be polite, that want to like do research or support research in the Amazon. So that's UK, Norway, and I'm sure other EU members, United States. So that's where I have this. We were basically, Syracuse University was invited to join this Belmont Forum proposal being led by the Norwegian Academy of Sciences, with also the UK government, and with these Brazilian researchers. So there's and the University of Manchester in the UK, outside of the EU, I know, is part of this effort, and I'm sure, and in any case, I'm just one humble professor in upstate New York, but I've worked a lot with the European Commission at different times in my career, and I know the quality of many of their programs, especially in the science areas. So I'm sure they're part of this. And now finally back to blockchain. It's like the best blockchain research institutions, generally like University of Zurich, University College London. Those are some of the very best centers of expertise in the world. And there's a lot of, and this area, I'm not far from the first to where think about using blockchain for forestry. It's combining blockchain with forestry, with geospatial data through something else that is also derived from the same agency that gave us the internet way back when, if you know which agency I'm talking about. So that's part of where we're working with. So we have some extra things up my sleeve that the EU wouldn't just yet to bring to the table. So we'll see how this goes. But there's there's a lot of great work in the EU in this area, and I'm sure it would all come together with us being just like the proof verification at the very edge element that maybe makes this whole thing better, hopefully.
Well, I was just going to say, it must have been interesting to be in LA choking on the smoke and knowing that you're doing something that might affect that.
Yeah.
That was quite the feeling there, saying, this is awful, this is terrible, and I really hope we can continue to make progress with our work as fast as possible.
Yeah, I hope so too. I mean, this sounds like something amazingly wonderful, and we very much need to do something about our little planet. We only have one.
I have one. All right. Well, thank you for joining us, Professor McKnight. It was wonderful talking to you.
Yeah, so wonderful.
And hopefully we can talk again in the future and see how things have gone with the program.
I welcome the opportunity, and I really enjoyed the chat with you, Seth, Caroline. Thanks so much for giving me the opportunity to share some old stories and new stories.
We love it. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for watching or listening to The Internet is Crack. To donate money and help Dr. McKnight cool the planet, go to theinternetiscrack.com/cooltheplanet. One word. You can watch us or listen to us on YouTube or Spotify or many other outlets. And don't forget to follow us on social media. See you next Monday.